church, family, theology, news, entertainment, evangelism. If it's Christian, then we're talking about it. This is the Mike Charleston Podcast.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Mike Charleston Podcast. This is Mike Charleston, and today I am with Sarah Charleston.
Hello, everyone.
Larry is not with us, and we'll explain that in just a second. He's not being punished or anything, but he is... he's not available today. We're going to be doing this just us today. So, well, thank you for listening. If you're watching on YouTube, how are you doing? We're trying to build that up a little bit here, and obviously not many people are watching it, but that's all right. This is our third location that we're trying, and the key thing is lighting. We don't have our studio built. We haven't even started our studio.
Might be a while.
It might be a while, but we're trying, and so hopefully this will look a little better. I noticed the last one was just way too grainy. We're trying to use cameras that aren't very good, so lighting is very important. So anyway, but hopefully for the podcasters, this will be just fine. Nothing has changed.
Yep.
Hopefully. So anyway, so we got a lot to get to today. We are going to be starting, I don't know if you want to call it a series, but we're probably got about 3 episodes that we're going to be covering some of these things that we're going to be talking about, like culture and family and sheltering and homeschooling and all these types of things that we do as a family here that are very important to us. And so we know these things pretty well, and we want to pass some of these things on.
Sounds good.
What kind of brought this along was kind of this weekend, right? So this weekend, we actually had a graduation party for one of our sons, our oldest son.
First graduation.
You're right, because the other 2 girls, they graduated before him, but we didn't do a party. Well, our friends, the Tates, they do parties for everything, and which is fine. And their girls, Sharon, the 4th one, I don't know.
Hard to keep track.
Right. They last year, she technically graduated last year, and so they, because of COVID and just couldn't get together really with parties and stuff, so they decided to hold it off until this year. Well, same thing with us. Jeremiah graduated last year, kind of.
Sure, let's go with that.
And so we got another family in on it, and it was just it was a nice little celebration. We had volleyball. We had laser tag there. Laser tag was kind of the cool thing. Now you're probably thinking, a cheesy laser tag. No, these were cool laser guns, and the sight, not the sight, but the sensor was on the laser gun. So you had to hit the gun. And so it was different. We played it at night, which was really, all you saw was the tracer lights, and then you walked around. And so anyway.
It was fun to watch, and I think fun for all the young people. I'm not so sure about for some of the older people.
Well, I never lost.
Okay, well, I mean, that's good. So maybe it was worth it.
I survived, but I did pay a price.
Right.
So earlier in the day, we played some baseball, and I hadn't done that in a while, and I twisted my ankle, which is tradition at the Tate's house. So if I get active at their house, I twist an ankle. And this time, it wasn't so bad. We soaked my foot, did the hot, cold.
Hydrotherapy.
Yes. And poor Jeannie, she's just like, you don't have to complain. I'm like, what would be the fun in that? That's what I do. It's just fun. And yes, I know I could just grin and bear it, but no, that wouldn't be very fun.
That's not usually the way with men.
Is that so?
Oh, sorry.
So anyway, so I woke up the next day, my foot was feeling a little bit better, but my back was a little sore.
I thought it was your knee.
My knee too.
Oh, okay.
But my body was a little sore. This 45-year-old body is struggling. So, but anyway, it was a fun event. One of the graduates there actually got engaged recently. We won't necessarily say their names. I don't know if they want it out there, but it was nice to see them. And but anyway, what did you think of the weekend?
I thought it was a lot of fun. I actually wished we had done something like that for Abigail and Rebecca.
Well, we asked them if
I know.
we said we can just do a backlog, and I
Right.
could cover all three of you at once, and they didn't really want to, and I get it, but so I guess Hannah's next, and she I don't know if she really wants to, but the Tates, they like line up with our kids, like age wise,
Right.
just perfectly. To some point, at some point it drops off because we stopped,
Right.
and they kept going. But anyways, I'm sure we'll have others to graduate with others, and so anyway, that was a fun weekend.
I really liked the videos.
The videos, of course.
All the pictures of their lives. That
Maybe
was
we'll
really
put that
neat.
on YouTube, and then people can
Hey,
see.
good
No, we're
idea.
not. Jeremiah would be. Jeremiah says he can't be embarrassed, but we could work hard on him. Last night he almost got embarrassed last night, but anyway, so that's what was going on in our house the last week or so. Nothing else really out of the ordinary.
Nope.
Just a graduation, watching some of our kids grow up. We have 4 adults now living in our house. We actually have 6 adults, including me and you. So, but anyway, so what we have going on, because of that, we want to talk about why we ended up homeschooling, why we ended up going the direction we did. And we kind of talked about that at the graduation a little bit.
Right.
And so we talked about it, and we were already talking about that a little bit anyways. So we thought, well, why don't we save it for the podcast and make a couple episodes? And so we're going to kind of talk about today creating a culture and just sheltering your children. I know that's a bad word for a lot of people, but we're going to cover it because it's Christian. We're going to talk about it. And then the next one, we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about.
More of the specifics of homeschooling and how we did that.
Yeah, because we're different, and but we'll get into it later. But our kids are brilliant, and they turned out just fine.
Yep.
And so it is proven. It works, but we did a lot of unschooling, if you know what that means, and which can be very dangerous at times, maybe.
Yeah,
And so,
pretty much.
but anyway, we're excited about talking about this subject because I think this is really where our heart is. Our heart is with family and with protecting our kids and raising up godly seed for Christ. And this is where I think a lot of parents, they start out well and then they don't finish well, or they don't start out very well and it's a struggle to try to get there.
back, yeah.
Right. So I think this is very important for families, for godly Christian families. And so we'll talk about that when we get back. We're going to talk about culture and sheltering. So go ahead, Joshua. Joshua is not even near us. Usually he is like right next to us. He's across the room right now. So go ahead, Joshua, get us out of here.
You're listening to the Mike Charleston podcast.
We are back, and I think we missed that one just a little bit, Joshua, but we are back, and we actually needed a break that time. So we are going to figure this out. We got all these lights and cameras, and actually, we just had to go to the bathroom. But no. So anyway, babe, we want to talk about creating culture in the family and what that looks like. So anyway, what is culture? Let's first define what is culture. You have it written down there. So
I do have it written.
Okay.
Culture is a word for the way of life of groups of people, meaning the way they do things. We find culture in people's writing, religion, music, clothes, cooking, what they do, just their way of life. That's what culture is.
Right. And it influences their views and their traditions, their beliefs, their norms, their values, their humor, their hopes, their loyalties, and their worries and fears. So we live in Louisiana.
Yeah.
We are known for having culture.
Right.
Like they don't even just have to say what kind of culture. We have culture down here. And what does that mean? Our music it's very unique. We have Zydeco music down here. We have the Cajun cuisine, the food. Food is very important to culture, right?
Right.
So, and
At least here.
we have a very diverse group down here. So we have a unique culture, and people are just fascinated with Louisiana culture.
Right.
And it's just kind of what it is. Well, we're not talking about Louisiana culture. We want to talk about creating your own godly culture,
Right.
which some cultures can have a godly culture, but some not so much.
So much.
So, yeah. So what do we do about this? Are we creating the culture in your home, or is the culture creating you? That was like your question, right?
Right.
You didn't ask that question. So anyway, is the culture, what do you mean by that? By that question?
Well, because we live, like you say, in a culture. We live in Louisiana, so we have Louisiana culture, we have American culture. And so we can choose to just kind of go with the flow, and whatever happens, whatever's around us, we just accept it all, and that just becomes our culture. Or we can go against some of that and say, okay, we're going to do things differently in our home.
Correct. Right. And so that's kind of the key. So many of us grow up in American culture, and we don't even question it. Right. We don't question it at all. We just assume that we're Americans, right? This is the greatest nation on the face of the earth. That's what we always hear. And so there must be nothing wrong with our culture.
Right.
Actually, there's a whole bunch wrong with our culture.
Yeah.
And we rejected our American culture, not completely.
Right.
But there was a lot of things that we saw, and we didn't want to participate in that culture.
Yeah.
So, and the reason why we're making a big deal about this, I'm going to be mentioning that we created our own culture. And so that's kind of important to kind of lay the groundwork of what culture is, and that we wanted to instill our culture and not the worldly culture. We don't want our kids just to be raised in this world, and whatever, is out there is just acceptable. Not everything that's out there is acceptable.
Yeah.
We want to make sure that it is God given and God breathed, and this is godly, right?
Right. Well, I think so many times people just, like you say, they accept things so quickly. And so when everybody gets iPhones, we all get iPhones. When everybody gets a Facebook account, we all get Facebook. When everybody gets DVD players, I mean, whatever it is, that's the new technology or the new whatever, we just all welcome it, without even thinking, into our home. And that's where the danger sometimes can
even
be.
if we're uncomfortable with it.
Right.
And we just kind of go on, even in our circles. I'll give you a little story, and I don't want to offend anyone. I'm not trying to be more like religious or non-religious or whatever. But at some of the camps that we have gone to, the cool event to do at a very conservative Christian event is dancing. They'll have a dance. We were very uncomfortable with that. We didn't grow up with dancing, and we didn't allow dancing. So, but because everybody else was doing it, and the culture of the people that were around, this was acceptable. So we allowed it a little bit until I saw it, and I'm like, nope. Kids, come back. And we decided to do something else. And which was fine. I'm not making a judgment on anybody else. It's just for what we wanted to do. I didn't want that. I didn't want the whole dancing scene. And so whether you are aware of it or not, you are creating a culture in your house apart from American culture. I don't care if you're Chinese. I don't care if you're Mexican. I don't care if you're American living here in the United States. Because Chinese people come over here, and Japanese people, they still try to keep their customs and their culture somewhat, but eventually they get swallowed up by American culture.
Yeah.
And so what we wanted to do was not be swallowed up by the American culture.
Right.
We wanted to create our own culture.
Well, I think as Christians, we're supposed to do that.
Right.
And we are supposed to, be the gatekeepers and consider what comes in and what we allow our kids to do. So like you say, with dancing or with other things, we've had to consider and realize everybody else accepts this, but maybe we don't. Maybe we don't feel comfortable. So
no, and that the fact that you don't feel comfortable should be a check, in your spirit. We're going to talk about this in the third episode about legalism and convictions, which is a very fine line. Yeah. And we'll talk about that in about 3 weeks. So, but in that creating, if you don't feel right about something, you want to make sure, you want to know why you don't feel right. Maybe you are being legalistic about something and you need to chill out a little bit. Yeah. Or maybe it's something that, hey, this is not what we want to do as a family. This is not what we're about. Not that we have to sit there and make judgments, but you can just pull out of something. If there's a movie on or a TV show that's you feel uncomfortable with, don't be afraid to pull your kids out. Creating your own culture takes a lot of boldness and it takes a lot of strength because it is so easy just to go along with the flow. I would just love just to go with the flow. And I think that's why we kind of created some of our communities that we have. Right. The community that we have, it does make us feel a little bit more at ease. We can bring our kids and we're a little bit more at ease. Now, we still have to be on our tiptoes and watch just in case. But for the most part, we can let our hair down just a little bit and relax because for the most part, most of the people that we are surrounded ourselves with in our communities have the same convictions. They have the same belief systems for the most part. Yeah. And it's easy. You can let your guard down, which can be good or bad.
Right. It can be dangerous for sure, but it does help to be around people that share similar values.
Right.
So that's for sure. So how do we create this culture in our family?
Well, how do we create this culture? So this is you have a couple of verses you wanted to read there.
I do. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." And then 2 Thessalonians 2:15 says, "Therefore, brethren, stand fast and hold the traditions which ye have been taught, whether by word or our epistle."
Yeah, so anytime you're writing a book or you're doing a podcast or a YouTube, it's always good to have the Bible verses. In parentheses, they always have the in brackets there, the Bible verse, and no one ever checks out. So, be conformed not to this world. I think that's an easy one.
Right.
So, but how do we do that? It's like, that is very open-ended, right?
For sure.
Your idea of what is worldly, my idea of what is worldly. That's episode 3 coming up here.
Well, most Christians would think they're not conforming to this world, but if we look, they all look very different in lifestyle and what they choose to do and what they accept in their homes.
Absolutely. It should be evident. When the world looks at us, it should be obvious, not because we're all wearing black and have long hair, even though maybe that might be part of it, but that they should know because of our life and that we're not into all the things that the world is concerned with. The world is concerned with humanism. How are we going to make ourselves better and better? Right. And what we are concerned with is Christ. We are wanting to be Christ-like. And so as long as we are following Christ, it's going to bring light into the darkness. The light and dark don't have fellowship, so it's going to be obvious. Right. So I think but Romans chapter 12, verse 2 here, "And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind," is a good one. This is how we'll know the will of God, the perfect will of God, as some people might have it. Right. And hold to the traditions. Now, this one we use like for the house church and all that. What Paul the Apostle, he's brought their traditions. He's not talking about hold fast to the traditions which you have been taught, like Old Testament ways, the traditions of the fathers or anything like that. He's talking about how he has come to them. He has brought the gospel to them. He has shown them how to live and follow that, whether by word or by epistle. And so anyway, we are going to talk about what are some of the things we started by. So
how did we do that with our family?
So the number one thing, and I know this is a trope and everyone knows this is a homeschool thing, but we started out with no TV. And like, oh, you're going to go there. Okay, this is legalism. No, hear us out. Because I wasn't afraid about my kids. We have a TV. I'll just let you know. We have an actual screen that we can watch things on. But we have never had cable in our home. Now, we've had cable in your parents' apartment, but we have never had cable in our house, in our dwelling. We've never watched cable TV in our house. And that was for a very specific reason. Yeah. Very specific reason. Now, when we first got married, we went to schools that didn't allow TV at all in the dorms. And so we were talking about how we wanted to live our lives. And you were very uncomfortable with having TV in the house. And I was like, well, like at all? Like not at all? Like I can't watch a football game or anything? And you're like, I just really don't like, you don't like football, but you didn't like the TV because you saw what it was kind of doing to your family, that they would just turn on the TV and it was always on, always on, always on. There was never a break from it. And you didn't like that. You actually pray that they would get saved or something like that. And no,
it's a little extreme, but it's just, you see how it can just take over, and it kind of takes away conversation because it's just kind of on and everybody kind of just gets glued to it. And instead of encouraging people building relationships. We're just kind of vegging.
Right. We're living separately in the same homes. That's
Right.
basically, especially nowadays when everyone is on their devices. I can live in my world. You can live in your world.
Right.
We're all living in our own world under the same home. We cease becoming a family at that point.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like I was totally against TV in and of itself. Like I wasn't one of those that TV is evil.
Yeah.
But here is where TV is evil. Because there's probably some good shows, especially nowadays. There's so many shows out there. And I know like my dad, he likes to watch HD TV. He's a realtor. So he likes to watch those house hunter things. And I'm sure those are fun. I have no problem. The History Channel, there's some good stuff on the History Channel. And there's some sports that, I miss somewhat, But here's the thing. TV cuts out creativity. Like you said, it stifles creativity. And it dumbs down the mind. And here's the biggest thing. It creates culture within your house.
Right.
What do I mean by that? The TV is showing you how life is supposed to be living. And if you don't think that it's not true, you're a fool. Because they don't advertise because it doesn't work. It works. Advertising works for a reason. They keep pushing it. They dull our minds over and over. They have the sitcoms that show you how life is supposed to be.
Right.
You say, oh, it's just fun and games. Yes, it is. And it shows you how the teenagers are supposed to respond to the parents. They show you how the parents are supposed to respond to each other. Right. We're ingrained in this. We just think that divorce is acceptable now because we see it on TV. Right. We see that the teenagers go through a rebellious stage. Why? Because we see it on TV. Yeah. Not because we see it in our family, because we see it on the television. We see it on all the shows. We see it on everything that we see, and then it slowly just creeps into everybody's lives. The divorce rate was down to like 5% or something like that in the, maybe not to 5%. It was a lot lower in the 20s. Yeah. You move forward to 2020s, people aren't even getting married. Like, what's the point? They're just shacking up. And the people who are getting married are still getting divorced at a 50% rate. So it's, where are these things slipping in? The TV, the entertainment is controlling our culture. They're telling us what to wear. They're telling us what is acceptable, what our hairstyle should be. And they're showing us what is cool. Yeah. What is the latest gizmo thing? When I was a kid, I wanted to eat Life cereal because, Mikey likes it. That's right. And the commercials I saw, I would be like, hey, Mom, Dad, I wanted to get Star Wars toys. Why? Because I watched Star Wars and I wanted to play with the figures and G.I. Joe figures and all that stuff. That all came from watching TV and just sitting there and vegging out. And I wasn't interested in reading books. I did read some books, but I wasn't really, I'd rather watch TV.
It's much easier.
It is. But my parents had rules, only so many hours, and they tried. But when I didn't have any restraints, I just turn on the TV and it would be on for background. I would come home and I'd be all by myself. I just turn on the TV. Yeah. And that is slowly just getting into your mind, the culture that they want you to, the producers, the world. They're not Christians. These people are not Christians. They don't care about Christ. They are influencing us, and we don't even know it. We let the Trojan horse into our house, and we're just opening the door to the evil that's coming in. Yeah. And you're like, oh, but it's not an evil show. But it wears on us slowly. It shows us how family should live.
It does. It makes it normalizes all the life out there, all the family life, the relationships. It just becomes normal. You just become dull and sensitized to how our lives are supposed to be because it's not what we see.
Yeah, and if you're a parent and you're against some of those things and you're trying to fight against those things and your kids are constantly seeing this stuff on TV.
Right.
They're watching Saved by the Bell and saying, well, they just hang out at the local place. Why can't I go hang out at the local place with my friends? Well, because I don't want you to hang out with your friends at the local place. Well, everybody's doing it. And everybody does do it because they first saw it there and they're like, well, let's go hang out at the mall. Let's go hang out here. Let's dress the same. Everybody wants to be so individualistic that they look alike. It's kind of amazing. Yeah. But anyway, so no TV was a real big one for us. It was a challenge for me. I honestly, I'll be honest, I kind of wanted TV. I was like, I don't really struggle with watching too much TV. So why do I have to be punished? But after we talked about it and I actually thought about it and I read some books on it, I realized that, yes, the culture that they are creating through TV was a big deal. This is a big one. Yeah. To me, this was the absolute biggest one. Now, this generation, if you're a young person and you're watching this, you have probably no idea what we're talking about because you're like, cable, what?
Well, because when we got married, the only way really that the world was going to come into our home was through the TV because there was no internet, phones, all this other
internet
stuff that we
just
have.
Fresh.
So that was the only way it was coming in, and we said, nope, we're going to cut that off.
Now the floodgates are completely open, and it's a lot more difficult to maneuver because we have the internet, and the difference between the internet and TV. TV was strictly entertainment. Right. It was pretty much just strictly entertainment. And I mean, maybe you could turn on PBS. I don't know.
On the History Channel, learn a few things.
Sure. But for the most part, it was strictly entertainment. You can just go and just sit there and veg. With the internet is so intertwined with our lives nowadays. It is, we do everything. We do our banking, we do our schooling somewhat. Right. And we watch our TV shows. And so it is, now it's a little bit more refined. So we have to be even wiser in how we act. And yes, we do have the internet. So it's a little bit tricky, and we'll talk about that later, maybe in another episode. But yeah, so TV was a big one. And so young people out there who are starting out and you are trying to figure out your family, you need to think about this. You need to think about how I can create my culture. And don't be afraid of being like, well, the sheltering issue or the overprotective parent. You get one shot at your kid, one shot of raising your kids. Right. You mess that up, it's over. Yeah. You get one shot. We took it extremely serious. Technically, we didn't take it seriously until Jeremiah was born. And we thought we had it under control with Abigail and Rebecca, but then Jeremiah came along and we needed help, and we tease him a lot, but it wasn't his fault necessarily. It was just because he was the third one and we don't have any more hands.
So you say we didn't really take it seriously, but that was, Abigail was 2 when he was born. So we didn't have many years of not really.
Right. We were still trying to figure life out together. Right. And by the time our 3rd anniversary, literally he was born the day before our 3rd anniversary. Right. Yeah. And so by our 3rd anniversary, we had 3 kids. Think about that. And we had 3 kids in our first 3 years. So we're still trying to figure it out. Jeremiah helped us figure it out because we had to figure out something. Yeah. It was extremely important. Now, TV was already, we're not going to do this. And at that point, we decided we were going to homeschool. Even before they were born, we'd already decided we were going to homeschool our kids. Yeah. But that's going to be more specifically the next episode,
we'll talk about that more next week.
Right. So,
but the deciding to homeschool was a big factor, obviously, in creating the culture that we're talking about.
Absolutely. So. Because if you don't homeschool, whatever you try to do at home is completely undone. Right. In the public school system. The public school system is ungodly. It's godless. They do not promote godliness. Our first goals, and I guess we should cover this at homeschool. We'll do that in the next episode. But yeah, God is first and foremost. Jesus Christ is first and foremost in our lives. Yeah. No matter what we do, whether we homeschool or not homeschool, house church, not house church, celebrate things, don't celebrate, whatever we do or don't do does not matter. I mean, it matters, but it's Christ. Jesus Christ is the most important thing, and we want to point our kids to Jesus Christ. And we thought the best way to do that was by sheltering them. And we're going to get into the shelter. I know that I just cursed to some people. Like, I can't believe he's going to talk about shelter. Shelter, overprotective parent, shelter. This is the most dangerous thing you can be teaching. Well, you can do what you want, but we're going to talk about the biblical way and a good way to shelter. I know some people over shelter and do it too long, and it gets a little weird. And we're going to talk about that. But to shelter your kids is natural and normal, and we'll get into that. But so the one big thing, go ahead.
So in deciding to homeschool, part of that is we believe that when your kids are born, they're a blank book. So.
Yeah, well, this isn't original to us or anything. We've heard someone talk about this before, and we kind of bought in real quickly. Right. That imagine your child is a book, and is a blank book. They come blank. They have no history. They have no agendas. They're nothing. They're a blank book, literally a blank book. And the pen that you have, I'm holding up to the camera. I don't have a pen, but here you go. Here's a pen. The pen, you're writing, and there are going to be many authors in that book. Is the school going to be one of the authors? The public school? The grandparents going to be one of the authors?
Because you as the parent have the power to give that pen to somebody else or to keep it yourself and say, no, I'm going to write for right now.
Right. And we are responsible for who writes in our kids' book. And so it's our job to watch them, be careful on their influences that are in their lives, especially in the first 7 years of their life.
Right.
This is a very formative time of their life, their development, their brains are just taking everything in, and they're learning at such a high rate in these first 7 years. And if you just throw them off and just let them play with whomever or hang out with whomever, you might be causing some issues there in the future.
Right. Or even going back to like how we talked about the no TV. Some people use the TV as a babysitter. So you kind of hand that book over to whatever programming or whatever, and, say you write for a while and, you teach them what you want to teach them. But
and they'll write good stories too. And the kids will love it and want more.
Yeah.
So we have to be, if we realize our kids are blank books and that every day we're writing, we wanted to be the main authors in their book. Now, obviously we wanted Christ to be the main author,
right?
But in the beginning stages, we are the main author. We wanted to be the biggest influencer in their lives. We wanted them to be like us, not like their friends, not like the schools, not like the coaches, not like the teachers, not like anybody else. We wanted them to be like us. We wanted them to that's why we wanted to create a culture to point them to Christ. Now, creating a culture does not make them Christians. Let me just tell you that right now. But if you make it so good and the enemy out there makes it so bad, it's going to be an easy choice. They're going to see the love of Christ in the home. They're going to see the love. It should be obvious.
Yeah.
But we'll get into that here maybe in the next episode. But anyway, we did not want our kids we wanted them to be like us. We didn't want them to be like their kids.
Right.
1 Corinthians 11:1 says, be followers of me, even as I also am of Christ. So we are raising men and women of God. We're not raising boys and girls just to get them to 18 and get out of the house. Right. We want them to be effective in this world. And so follow me as I'm following Christ. That is the call in Deuteronomy 6 to teach our kids, when we rise, when we go down, when we lay down, where we walk by the way, wherever we go, we are teaching our kids, whether you know it or not.
Right.
You're still teaching your kids.
And for sure they're following you. And that verse is really actually kind of scary when you say, follow me as I follow Christ. I take that seriously. And that's pretty heavy to think that I would look at my kids and say, okay, guys, follow me because I'm following Jesus. So do what I do. But that's the real deal. That's what it says. Yeah.
So first and foremost, you have to be right with God when you're doing these things. And second thing is to be real prayerful and consider about these. What are the things that might be creeping into our lives that might be bad influences? And you may be like, oh my goodness, are you serious? Yes, we are. This, like I said, you get one shot at raising your kids.
Right.
Now, is God good and gives us grace if we mess up?
Absolutely.
Yes, he does. And have we been perfect? No, we haven't been perfect at it. We've learned throughout the years different things, but you only get one shot at this. And then by the time they're 18, 19, and they're gone, if they choose to, if they're sometimes maybe even earlier, but when they're going off to college or whatever they choose to do, you are done.
Right.
Now, we don't do college and all that, but that's a whole nother story. But if they chose to go to college and if they still want to go to college, that's on them. And our training at this point is over. Our influence is still amongst them, but it's probably a little small at this point, and hopefully the Holy Spirit is huge, and maybe some other people in their lives. It's other people are coming in toward the end of their life. The other people are starting to write furiously in their lives.
When you say you only get one shot, and that's just, you have to take that really seriously. So yes. I feel like that's when you talk about being intentional and really considering what it is.
Yeah, well, that's I didn't know we were going to get into that right now, the intentional part. Oh, but okay. We can go there. That's the other thing is that if Dave Ramsey, You hear him one time, you've heard him 100 times. But the one thing that I know about him is you have to be very intentional about your finances. No, we don't necessarily follow the plan completely, but but I like that aspect that you have to be intentional about this. If you're a parent, you better have a plan and you better be intentional, or else it's just going to go crazy. And that's the way it was going to happen in our house until we got a hold of some ideas and like, we need some help here. But if you're not intentional, things are still going to happen.
Right.
Whether you plan to fail, right? If you don't plan, you plan to fail.
Yeah.
So be very intentional. Get alone with your spouse and say, we need to come up with a plan. We need to figure out what is our goals. What are our desires? What's our culture going to be in this household?
Yeah.
What do we want to be like? Are we just going to be like everybody else? Are we just going to go down? Are we all lemmings here, go down the same road and just do the same things? Are we just going to celebrate Halloween just because everybody else is celebrating Halloween? Are we just going to go to Mardi Gras because everybody else is going to Mardi Gras? We're just going to go to the movie theater because everybody else is going to the movie theater?
Right.
Or are we just going to say, does God want us to do this? Does Jesus Christ want us to do this? Does he want us to participate in something like this and enjoy things like this, or to be a light in darkness? That's you're going to have to only get from Jesus Christ. You're going to have a relationship with Jesus Christ to get those answers.
Right.
I'm not going to give you a list of rules here.
Yeah.
No. That would be legalism.
Right.
So anyway, what else do we have here, babe?
Well, so then I wrote down a few things to consider and guard as to what you allow in your home. So these are just some things that we've thought about, and I think good for husbands and wives to sit down and think through. So things like movies, books, music even, which I think we're going to do an episode on that sometime. Traditions that you let in your home. You know, people create a tradition, especially around holidays and whatever. So it's like, all right, this is something we want to do. We have, our ice cream tradition, which
yes, we
I don't
do.
know if we ever really got into, but anyway, so we kind of, these are all things that we have to, they're all big things. Movies in itself, it's like, what movies are we going to let them watch? Are we going to let them, that's huge. You can spend a long time just on.
But this is what, we're not going to tell you any rules on. Maybe we should do a podcast on like good movies and what to look for, but we're not going to give you rules.
Right.
But movies, books, those are things that come in and influence you in ways. If you don't think so, you're a fool. Once again,
right.
Books influence you, movies influence you, TV shows influence you, music influences.
Right.
We have not let anything in our household except for Christian music. And even some of the Christian music, I'm not so thrilled about.
Right.
And as I look over at Joshua, but it's because it's a wide range on some of that stuff.
Right. Well, even going back to the books, I know when the kids were little, I would read. I read to them at first for many years, and then when they got to where they were reading on their own, I would try to read the books before them until they read just too much that at some point I couldn't.
Well, that's what we're going to get into in just a bit. Where at certain ages, like, by the time they're 16, I cannot read all their books.
Right.
We have 7 children. I can't read everything that they're going through. I can't filter everything for them.
Yeah.
At some point, they have to start living their Christianity out. They have to start living their. Now, I can bring out obvious things. Like, we're not going to be listening to country music. I'm sorry. We're not listening to secular music. And just that's my rule. I'm not going to be a legalist about it. I'm not going to be going to make a new rule here, or it's not about your salvation. That's not what we do here in our house.
Right.
We're not going to do this. We're not watching certain movies. Nope, we're not watching this. Too bad. If you want, you can do it at your home when it's your time. But this is not up for debate. We're not doing this. So they already know that this is a part of our culture.
Yeah.
This is, the name of Christ is going to be lifted up in our music. And in the movies, we've made some mistakes and let them watch some movies. And like, maybe we shouldn't have, and so on and so. But we got to discuss those things.
Right.
Music, books, movies, traditions, ministry. Do we teach our kids to care about others? That's a very important thing. Hospitality. Whew. Yeah, that
because
can be
those
tough.
things are part of creating that family culture where our kids grow up knowing, we welcome people into our home.
Right.
We don't always have to have people that just meet certain criteria, or we are
Right.
willing to reach out to people, and all of that is part of creating that culture. Your kids knowing that, hey, it's a bigger world than just us, and we have other people to
Absolutely
care about.
So those are all good things that you need to think about. Movies, books, music, traditions, ministry, hospitality. All those things are big influencers in your culture. And maybe we could break down all those one day. It's not that important, but I mean, it is very important, the influence in your household.
Right.
But you are the father. If you're the father, you are the gatekeeper of this. And I know you're like, oh, you're Mr. In Control. Well, we'll talk about that, buddy. If you think you want to be in control of certain things, you're not just going to let your kids just wander out in the street, are you? We're going to talk about that. We're going to take a break because we probably have to restart the video. But no, we need to take a break. And when we get back, we'll get into sheltering and what that really looks like, that and what the problems are with that and the benefits of sheltering. So, all right, Joshua, are you ready to get us out of here? Let us go.
The Mike Charleston Podcast. The Mike Charleston Podcast.
Hey, thank you for listening to the Mike Charleston podcast today. If you want to be part of the show or ask a question or just whatever, just email us at talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. That's talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. You can go to YouTube. The link will be down here at the bottom of the podcast, and you can click on that and it'll go to our YouTube page. If you're watching on YouTube, please click on the subscribe button and get the notifications and all that stuff. Thank you again. All right, we are back, and we are with Sarah. We forgot to tell you that Larry's not with us, but
You said that.
we did. But I didn't say why he was not with
okay.
us. And Larry, we just decided that this subject is a little bit personal. You know, like we know the subject, and he felt like he'd be a third wheel. And he might have been. I don't know. He would have been. I said it probably would have been
fine.
better if it was him and Pam, and then me and you.
Right.
But it just wasn't going to work out. They're not here locally, so it just probably wasn't going to work out. So it's just going to be me and you for the next couple episodes. But that's all right.
That's all right.
That's right. We sat at the Subway trying to figure all this stuff out. So anyway,
Got some nutritious food.
that's right. So a little plug there for Subway, I guess. So, okay, well, we are going to be talking about sheltering. Now, I know a lot of people, when I first we started homeschooling a long time ago, about 21 years ago, 22 years ago, we started homeschooling, and we're not professionals by any stretch, but our kids turned
just
out.
the opposite, actually.
We are not very professional. We really didn't know what we were doing, and we weren't going to spend a whole bunch of money on it. And we'll get in that into the next
week.
Next episode. But education was not our main concern. We wanted them to be educated, but it was not our main concern. Our main concern was Jesus Christ, honoring God.
Yeah.
And in the process, our kids actually learned some stuff. And they're actually very brilliant, and they're very creative. And that's because they didn't sit there and watch TV the first 7 years of their lives. For the first 10 years of their life, they read books. They were creative. They experimented on things, and they are now they're producing things. They make music. They do YouTube videos now. Joshua's in charge of all this, so he's figuring it out. And so, you know, it's not that we're afraid of technology. We're not afraid of technology at all, but there's a time and place for it. Right. So that's kind of what we're going to be talking about now is sheltering. Now, when we say the word sheltering, people are like, oh man, you guys are those protective type parents. Well, if you came and met us, you would see that our kids are very well adjusted, as they say, very sociable, and you couldn't tell. They're very pleasant kids. They don't complain. They hardly complain, I should say.
Right.
You know, for the most part, they don't complain. They don't argue. They don't fight. We have all of our kids are now teenagers and up.
Yeah.
We never went through the teenage rebelliousness because they didn't know any better and because they didn't need to. They loved each other. They got along. We worked together. We created our own culture. Now, we're not trying to pat ourselves on the back. Right. What I'm saying is this works.
Yeah.
This works because it was a Christ-driven home that we raised them into. And they didn't fight. They didn't argue. They didn't steal each other's stuff. They didn't hide. They didn't bicker. They didn't rebel against us. Even to this day, even our 21-year-old, I could tell her to do something and she would do it.
Yeah, right away without complaining.
Right. Without and asking any questions, she would do it. Even Jeremiah, our son, you know, he's got his own mind and he's going to lead his own family one day, and good for him. If I asked him to do something, he would know that it's for a good reason.
Right.
And he might look at me sideways and be like, is there something behind this? But no, they would obey immediately because that's the way they were trained. And we don't abuse that. We don't tell them what to do at 21. My goodness, I don't control their lives, but
Right.
they know how to live.
Well, and that's not the norm in our culture today. In American culture,
No.
what we have isn't what's out there.
No.
And I remember going to the store, taking all the kids with me when they were much younger, and people would be like, "Oh, wow, how'd you do that?" And they're like, "Oh, you just wait till they're all teenagers." And I remember thinking, "Oh boy, what did I get myself into?" But I know we talked about it, and we said, why is it that teenagers always have to go through this rebellion? And
Right.
we thought maybe that's not even true. It's just what everybody's passed on, and that's what we've
Yeah.
thought has to happen. But
Once again, it's who are we going to believe? I believe God. I believe the Bible. I believe the scriptures. I believe what he tells us. And I believe that if we love one another and we love God,
Yeah.
it's going to be evident in our lives, and it's going to be evident in this household, and it's going to be full of life. It's going to be full of joy. What person wouldn't be attracted to that?
Right.
They're not. If that is in your life, no one's going to be like, well, I don't want that. I don't want happiness and joy and love and peace and kindness. I like being depressed. I like being miserable. Oh, well, no, you don't.
Right.
Most people want to be joyful and peaceful and loving.
Yeah.
And so that's the atmosphere that we created. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of discipline, honestly, probably
Yeah.
more for me than you, but it to me, it was worth it. And we're going to break this down into like sevens, the first 7 years, the next 7 years, and then the final 7 years. We'll break it down like that. We stole that from a guy that's dead now, but it made sense to me. And we'll kind of talk about like that. But first we'll talk about sheltering. So when you say, well, what is sheltering? Well, at the very basic level, it's as if it was raining outside and you went under shelter.
Right.
That's basically what it
Right.
is.
Protection from something, whether it's a roof protecting you from the rain, or could be many other things.
Right. We got this from a guy in California, Jonathan Linval, and it made sense to us that when it's raining outside, you don't throw your kids out there. Well, sometimes we go play in the rain, but if it's storming out, it's a hurricane out, we don't go let them go play. We don't go let them play out in the street when it's
Right.
a busy road. But no, we protect them from that. We don't go playing out in the river, don't go.
Right.
And it's a storm out, it's lightning. It's time to come inside. It's come to be under the protection of the house. So in the same way, we have the shelter of the family, of the scriptures, of the Bible, and we don't want the outside influencing them at all and
Right.
getting them into that direction. Now, eventually, they're going to learn good and evil. They're going to learn what's good and what's bad. And so, but protecting our kids is very natural.
Yeah.
If
Everybody does that, even in the world, no matter who you are.
that
Everybody's
don't matter.
gonna-
If you see your kid walking around with a knife and he's 2 years old, what are you going to do?
You're going to go get the knife.
Unless you don't like that one. And then, but if they're sitting on a countertop and you walk into the kitchen, like how did they get up there for one?
Right.
But you're going to get them down because they're going to fall and hurt themselves.
Exactly.
And so we protect them. Now there's some people are like, well, I like my kid to touch the hot stove and they'll learn a lesson. And there is some truth to that.
Yeah.
But I don't want them to learn that way. There's a certain way I can teach them that this is hot and
Right.
this will burn you. And you got to trust your dad.
Right.
You got to trust your mom. And they learn to trust us because we didn't lie to them. We didn't trick them. We didn't abuse them at all. We loved them and we told them the truth about everything pretty
Right.
early on.
Yeah.
And we weren't afraid to show them the bad side of the world, but from the aspect of good, if that makes any sense, that we're still we're within the good. Like they could see the effects of what sex outside of marriage would do, or alcoholism or drug abuse. They could see that because we would be ministering to people. We would show them that this is what happens to people that go that way.
Right.
But in our house, we're all happy and joyful and loving, and because we follow God, we love God, and God is good to us. And not that he's not good to them, but he wants to call them to repentance.
Right.
And so anyway.
Which is all in like a matter of time, because obviously when they're really little, just like you said, the kid with the knife, you'd be like, oh no, I'm going to go get that knife from them. Well,
There's no explaining, right?
Eventually you want them to learn to be able to use a knife and to help you cut up whatever it is you're making for supper. But, so I mean, all the things that initially you shelter them from just about everything.
Right.
And then as they grow, it's like, okay, I'm going to let you see a little bit now.
And this is where a lot of parents get wrong when they get the idea of sheltering.
Right.
They want to shelter. They want to take that knife and never give it to them until they're 22. And I'm like, well, there are certain things that are acceptable. And we used to hold a standard that if watching movies, that if it's not good enough for the kids, it's not good enough for us. Right. Well, that was fine and good when the kids were 7 and younger. And we're like, okay, we're not going to watch anything bad with them. And not that we watch anything bad, but but as we got older, they were wanting to experience a little bit more of the world and more complex issues.
Right.
And we started seeing, you know what? We get it. We did that. We wanted more things to think about and more advanced storylines than
more
just
adult
Berenstain
topics.
Bears. Right. So, but there's not always appropriate for 2 and 5 and 6-year-olds. There's certain things. So you do have to figure that out. Once again, be led by the Spirit. Try to, that's up to you. If you want to, when you think it's the right time to show them certain things or walk them through certain things or talk about certain issues, that's between you and God at that point.
Well, and some people might have like specific ages. At this age, we let them do whatever. I don't think we really did so much with the age thing. I feel like more with your kids, you know them, you're around them every day, and you can kind of tell, I think they're ready for this. I think, they're at a place where they can understand.
Certain kids were more seriously minded and certain ones were a little bit more silly. And so we'd have to adjust, like, no, you're just not ready for that. Right. And maybe you're ready for this right now. And and just go from there. But anyway, this is a natural thing to protect your kids. I think that is obvious. The problem is, here's what the world will say. The world will judge you on this real quickly. And they're like, oh, you shouldn't protect your kids that much because when they get out in the world, they'll just go crazy.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't believe that. And I haven't seen that. My kids, right now, they're not home. The older ones are out with friends. But they, what I have found, and I wasn't homeschooled. You weren't homeschooled. We were both, well, I was public schooled. You were private schooled. But we were kind of in the world somewhat. We were Christians, but we were in that worldly culture somewhat.
Right.
I went to a Bible college. And in that Bible college, I saw some people go crazy. But you know what I've learned about that? It wasn't necessarily the people that went crazy weren't because they were so sheltered. No, that was what was in their heart was just available to get out even more. Right. I see that on LSU campus. I see that on Southeastern. I see it on every college campus I go to. It's not that the people that are going on those wild parties and drinking and all that stuff, it's not that they were sheltered kids.
Right.
That was in their heart already, and now they have more access to that. If your heart is for the Lord, you're not going to be drawn to that anyways. Right. I think that's the key right here, that don't be afraid that, if I shelter too much, that they're going to just go crazy. No, if you don't shelter them, they are already crazy. They are already being influenced by the world. They are already being drawn away from that world, and they may not even make it to college. You may have already lost them by the time they're in middle school and in high school, and they're already rebellious and have nothing to do with you. So if you want to go that route, then go ahead and go that route. Right. But it is imperative to shelter them to some degree. To how much? That depends on your culture, what you wanted to create in your household.
But you're right. It isn't a shocker when you see even I know from my high school people that I grew up with, and then you see that, whoa, they went like way off the deep end. But, people that I went to school with, they'd be like, yeah, no shocker there. Because they were always the ones that were in trouble, always,
exactly.
Pushing limits and whatever. And so then they get out and they have freedom, and they go even further.
Right. You were kind of sheltered a little bit and kept from, and you didn't go crazy. No. And I knew a lot of people who were kind of sheltered and they didn't go crazy. Right. And I'm like, that is a made up nonsense myth. Right. It's just to make people feel that because they have failed with their kids, that they're going to make you feel bad. And don't you dare try to be better. You might as well just go with the flow and just be bad just like everybody else. else and fail just like everybody else, because if you step out of that and actually do well, you're going to make me feel bad. So please, for the sake of us all, buy into our beliefs that they're going to go bad, okay, if you shelter them. But sheltering is not a bad thing. Now, here's where the bad part is, where some people like over shelter. Right. And I have seen this in some of our circles where they don't know the transition. The transition can be difficult, and we hold on a little too long, and we wait until they're 18, and we're still holding on. Well, guess what? Kids are curious. They want to explore. They want to enjoy life too. And they want friends. And so there is a time for friends and for exploration, but being introduced slowly and to the right people. Like our kids have traveled the nation by themselves to go to different events and different ministry opportunities. Right. But it's to go to something very specific and people that we trust and meet friends that we want them to be around and that we agree are good people for them to be around. Right. And so we encourage that. It's not that we don't want them to have friends. We want them to have friends. We actually want them to have a lot of friends. I like them to have a lot of friends. I want them to find like guy friends so they can get married. And no. So
what about if you do, like if a parent does maybe loosen the leash a little bit and say, okay, you can have a phone, or you can get Facebook, or you can go on this trip. Is it okay? I mean, what if you realize that maybe they weren't ready for that?
You can always pull back. It is tougher to pull back. We get it. But some of our kids just recently got on Facebook, like our 21-year-old, and she was like, I don't know, should I? I'm like, you can get your 21 if you want to be on Facebook. And we explained some of the dangers that you're going to run across, and like, you're not going to abuse it. We know her. She's not going to abuse it. But some of them haven't. I don't think Rebecca is. She doesn't really have a desire to be on. So it's kind of one of those things that she's mature enough to be on, at this point, but they have their own convictions. Maybe we really haven't sat down. It's not a need to be on Facebook, or, it's like, relax already. Social media isn't, we got along without social media growing up. But what was your question?
I'm just saying,
about pulling back?
Yeah, what if you allow them to do something, then you realize, and some parents think, well, it's just too late. Well, I already told them they could have.
Well, every parent has this problem. I mean, whether you're a homeschool family or not, I mean, I grew up in a not homeschool family. We had rules. Right. We had curfew, and sometimes my parents would extend it a little bit longer, and then we would abuse it, and they had to pull back. Right. And no one likes to pull back. No. No one likes that. The kids don't like that. Parents don't care. They're making the rules. Right. But the kids don't like that. But you know what? They adjust to whatever the rules are. And every household should have some kind of rules and the expectations that they have for their house. And because they are creating their own culture, whether they know it or not. And I think that's the key. But yeah, don't be afraid to pull back. I think that's where we've made some mistakes, maybe doing things a little early, and we just like, nope, we're pulling back, and we explain it to them why, and they're pretty cool with it most of the time. They're like, okay, now if we said you can, I don't even know what they would have a problem with, but whatever. Yeah. But our culture of the world today, so we have this professional culture. What do I mean by this professional culture? Maybe you don't know what I mean by this professional culture.
Well, I know we need in the world, people think that you need professionals to do everything. So even with homeschooling, like we'll get into next week, I can't teach my kids because I wasn't trained to be a teacher.
You're not a teacher. So what are you doing?
I don't have a degree. So
how could you teach your kids?
Right.
Because God told us to, for one.
Right.
And what do you mean I can't teach my kids to read and write and to do math? Now, when it comes to chemistry and English, higher English, I'm not your guy. But guess what? There are helps out there, and we'll get into all that later. Right. But our culture is so full. When I say our culture, not our culture, but American culture is so full of professionals out there. We got professional healthcare, or not healthcare. Well, we do have healthcare, but we got professional childcare. They'll take care of your child from 6 months till when they get into kindergarten. Then when the teachers take over, we got professional teachers because they know what they're doing. They went to school. We got professional pastors. They know what they're doing. So your spiritual needs are taken care of. All this stuff is for you to do. You are in charge of raising your child, not the state, not the neighborhood, not the church, not anybody else. It is your job. Once again, let me iterate this. one more time. You get one shot for each child. Each child, you get one shot to do this right. Make it a good one. Yeah. Make it a good one. Don't let the child care place that you kind of know what that's like because you worked in one growing up. Don't let the school system, they don't care about your kids. They just need to get them going on to the next year. And so don't entrust your kids to these systems. These systems do not care, do not love, do not cherish your children. You should cherish your children. Right. So and plus all these cultures are godless. Yeah. Godless. So what do you want from your family? Do you want a godly culture or do you want a godless culture? So hopefully you want a godly culture.
Right. And very important for husbands and wives to really sit down and think through these things. And even, we know a lot of young married couples who are just starting out. And I think that's a perfect time to sit down and to talk about all these things and say, where do we want to be? What do we want to be like? What do we want our family to be like? Because you get to decide. Like you say, you get one shot.
And I've talked to some of these young families as they are starting and they have different ideas. And I just kind of like, okay, whatever. Yeah. We'll see. And, some of them are more open-minded and some of them are more closed-minded. It just depends. Right. And I'm just amazed that we'll see. Because I do think, though, if you don't shelter, then don't be surprised when they start questioning their sexuality, their gender, because where do you think they learned that from? They didn't learn that from the scriptures.
Right.
And I know some of the more open-minded people are like, well, maybe they are guys, maybe they are girls, maybe whatever, maybe they should choose. No, God chose, and they're either male or female because it's science. Right. Science tells us what they are. Right. So anyway, these things are...
Well, these are things that we definitely have to consider, and people have to decide, what do you want that culture to be? And it's okay to shelter. It's not a bad word. You don't want to be overprotective and not let your kids live or experience anything ever, So.
No. But what we would do at church, we were helicopter parents. We would watch. So let me go over this real quick. I know we should be at the end here pretty soon, but early on, we were so much in our kids' lives. We were surrounded by when we sat with them. We'd listen to all their conversations. We were right there, and people were like, that is super controlling. No, we wanted to be Johnny on the spot because we were training our kids. Right. They don't lie today. Why? Because we were omnipresent. We were always there, so they couldn't lie because I'm like, we were there. We heard the story. No, that's not what happened. Or when they were getting ready to get mad, we caught that anger and said, no, we're not. Don't let that. That is part of sheltering. That is part of protecting them from themselves and saying, no, this anger is not good. We're going to stop it right now. This is called anger. And no, we're going to stop it right now. Okay. Well, if you're in the other room on the computer doing your own thing and you just let your kids upstairs just killing each other, how do you have a clue what's going on? Then they come run downstairs and say, he hit me. And then they said, no, he hit me first. And then you have to be a judge. I don't want to be a judge. I just want to be there to make sure. It takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of time.
And some people say, well, I don't have time to do that. And I know we heard somebody say, well, if you don't have time to do that,
you don't have time to be a parent.
Right.
You just not time. Then you're not a parent. And give up your kids if you don't have time. What is more important? Right. Whatever the thing that you're doing right now or your kids. Your kids, they were so important to us that for the first, 8, 9, 10 years of our married life, it was all done. It was all over. Our marriage was just strictly raising kids and pouring into our lives for those first 10 years of their lives so we could get our culture correct. And by the time Lydia came along, our youngest, she kind of knew the program by osmosis. She was just like, okay, everyone's doing this. So, okay, I guess I'll do this. And so the kids wonder why we didn't have to spank her as much, because she was perfect. No, no, she wasn't. But she basically understood the program early on. Right. With Abigail, Rebecca, and Jeremiah, we had to institute it. And we had to undo some of our bad behavior and things that we allowed. Yeah. But that's a whole nother little issue there. But, this is a good subject. We heard a guy, Denny Keniston, people don't like him. I don't care. But he came up with this thing where kids are a liability for the first 7 years of their life. It's kind of a break even for the next 7 years, and then it's an asset the next 7 years. So if you break it in 7-year periods, you could do 6-year periods, I guess, but 7 is pretty works. So 7 to 21. And the first 7 years, if you're a parent, it is a liability. You're working hard. You're doing everything.
It's just work. Everything. They need help with everything.
They can't do anything hardly. I mean, our kids started doing a little bit more responsible by the time they were 6 and 7.
Sure.
But by the time they're 7 to 14, it's a wash. Sometimes they need help and sometimes they can be helped.
Right.
And by the time they're 14 though, they should be pretty much an asset to the family. They should be productive. They should be able to be excited to help out with doing dishes and mowing the lawn and doing laundry and cleaning the house and helping with entertainment. You know, when I say entertainment, I mean like hospitality and getting ready for church and participating in that.
Yeah.
And pretty much in our family, that has gone just like that.
Yeah.
The first 7 years, it was all work on our part. And fortunately for us, we had all of our kids in 8 years.
Yeah.
So by 8 years, all 7 kids were born. And so by the time Lydia was about 7, that means Abigail was like 15.
Right.
And so everything was already in place. And so it was just about managing it. I know at times we felt like we were coasting and we wanted to be careful that we weren't coasting. We still had to be on our toes. Right. And at that point, it was more of our relationship with God. Are we going to be a fake family that just says we worship God? Are we going to be a family that actually worships God? And the kids can know if you're fake. Kids will find that out real quickly.
Absolutely.
And that's the unfortunate part. A lot of homeschool families can be Pharisees, and a lot of non-homeschool families can be Pharisees.
Anybody can do
right.
that.
It's not just for homeschool families. But we did find out that after between 7, maybe more like 9 or 10, but that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, definitely by the teenage years, that so-called teenage years, they are being more productive and less I have to do stuff for them.
Yeah.
They are becoming more responsible. They're becoming more understanding of their surroundings. And definitely in the last part there, they are productive. That we can trust them to go to the store, and get them something or to get something for us.
Well, again, that's not the culture that we live in, because usually people look at 15, 16-year-olds as worthless. In the world, they're really not good for much of anything.
And it becomes an antagonizing situation where the parents and teenagers just don't like each other. And most parents just don't like their kids, and the kids don't like their parents. Not true in our case. We love our kids. Kids love us. At least I hope so. No, but we get along just fine. We didn't tell a story yesterday at Jeremiah's graduation party, but I remember him, and we had to look back and go, is that true, the age? But we had him climbing up in the attic, wiring our house. He was wiring a light. We put a new light in, and he could only fit there, and he loves doing that stuff. How old was he?
I really don't know. He had to be 8.
Yeah,
maybe?
He was like 8 or 9 when he
9.
was wiring our house. Think about that. And
so
we
much
trusted
for sheltering.
him. Well,
we weren't keeping him safe.
Not that kind of shelter, but we trusted that. We saw his skills. He changed the light switch out before, and he proved to us that he knew what he was doing. And so we watched him before that, and then we wanted to put 2 pendant lights in, but we couldn't. We had to add a whole nother.
A junction box or something.
Oh yeah. And so Jeremiah went up there and said, I could do it. The kid was 8, 9 years old, something like that. And because it was at our other house, and he did it, no problem. Got it done. Got back in there. Just complained that I was a little warm up there, but poor kid. And so we raised our kids to want to learn, to want to strive to know things and be creative, and not to just sit and veg in front of a TV and let ungodly culture influence them, and then wonder why when they're 15 that they're complaining about whatever. Right. Like I have to go beg them. We have people we know that have to beg their kids to go out and mow the lawn or whatever. And I'm like, you don't have to if you do it correctly. Right. If you have a relationship and you do it right, they'll want to do the right things. They'll want to do the hard things.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely.
Anyway, any other final thoughts there, babe?
No, I think it was good.
Yeah, this is not an episode to pat ourselves on the back, honestly. No. We love our kids. We think we've done well with our kids, and we've done well raising them. I don't need anybody's applause. I can look at my kids and say, yes, we've done well. They're good kids, and they love the Lord, and they're a blessing to us, and hopefully we're a blessing to them. But we want to share these things because we want to be a blessing to everyone else out there, that this is possible. Don't be afraid to be different. Don't be afraid to stand up and be strong and to be courageous. It's so easy just to go with the flow. But we decided early on, we are going to be different.
Right.
We are going to do what God wants. Now, we're not doing things differently just to be different. We want to do what God wants. And so when God tells us to do something, we want to obey. And his ways work so much better. And you don't have to get everything right. Thank goodness. His grace is still good for us. But if you love the Lord, it's going to flow out of you first and foremost. Oh, and by the way, if you don't love your husband and wife, the spouse, you have to get that under control first.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a huge one. Maybe that's a whole nother podcast.
Several episodes, maybe.
But if you can't get the spouse relationship going, all this is fruitless, and you're going to create Pharisees.
Right. Well, and
eventually.
I guess also thinking real quick about creating that culture. Somebody listening might, think, oh, okay, I want to change everything, and I want to create some kind of other culture. But if your kids are already somewhat older and you've been doing things differently, it might take a little bit of time. Trying to build that relationship with your kids, and you got to come up maybe with other fun things. It's like, oh, we're going to cut off some of the TV, or we're going to do something else. You can't just have a family meeting and say, okay, no more this, no more this, no more this. It's probably not going to go really well.
You want to replace it with something good.
Right. So
replace it with good things.
Might be a little bit of work.
Yeah. And it depends on age. I mean, when we started doing all this, they were 2, 3.
Right.
It was easy.
Yeah.
If you're starting at 13, you do have a challenge.
Right.
We'll admit it is a challenge, but it is possible. You can do it. It's a lot more communication, a lot more talking with your young people.
Right.
But it is possible. So anyway, I hope you guys have been blessed. If you have a lot of questions, or if you say, no, man, you're way out there, fine. You can contact us at talk@fellowshipofbelievers.org. We are not offended because we've already raised our kids and they're a blessing to us. So we don't care if you disagree with us. But we just want to be a blessing to you guys, and this may work. We're not going to give you all the rules. That's between you and the Holy Spirit. So anyway, I hope this has been good. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching on YouTube, you can look down at the description. I know people always do that, so I think that's pretty cool. Just point their finger like, dude, you're going to edit that later and whatever. but no, please go to the YouTube if you want to check us out. See what we look like. Some people are like, we want to know what you look like, and I'm like, well, now you can. You can go to the YouTube, but then you find out that we have the reason why we have at least I do, I have the voice for radio, a face for radio. That's what it is, a face for radio. I don't really like being on video, but anyway. So anyway, I think that's time. Joshua, are you ready to get us out of here? All right. Well, babe, anything else?
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Until next week, thank you.
You've been listening to the Mike Charleston Podcast.